Hello and welcome to the Truth Within podcast, where we will be sharing precious teachings and the divine feminine wisdom that's being remembered for our time. I'm your host, Jo Youle, and each week I will be in conversation with Dee Delaney, author of the Truth Within trilogy. In this week's podcast, we take a 360 look at the self as we discover we are way more complex than we think. We will explore the blueprint for life and discuss how to reclaim and integrate all 12 aspects of our being. And we share ways to do this through recognizing, retrieving, and remembering archetypal energies that belong to us all. You can subscribe to our podcast through sacredstoriesmedia.com or search The Truth Within on iTunes. Connect directly with Dee via her website at deedelaney.co.uk, and you can follow me, Jo Youle, on @ResetRebel Productions on Instagram. If you're interested in creating your own podcast, I produce creative audio for brands, businesses, and provide digital content across the board. So Dee, welcome back.
Hi, Jo.
So lovely to be here on this spectacular vista across the sort of inland part of Ibiza. It's absolutely magical here, so it's really lovely to be back once again. And we've covered some fascinating topics in our conversations together to really help our listeners understand who they are and to help them live in harmony with themselves and with the world around them. And in this week's episodes, we're going to look at archetypal energies and the 12 aspects of the self. And to know oneself, one really needs to become familiar with the many faces of our being. So tell me a little bit more about this concept of 12 around 1 and how it sort of relates to the cosmos and the way we experience life on Earth.
Yeah, so how we experience ourselves is kind of complicated yet simple. And if we really understand where we come from and how we create our reality moment to moment, then we have tools to be the best we can in the world. And we can't really ask more than that. So this concept of 12 around 1 is the blueprint for life itself. Everything in the universe is made up of the same fundamental building blocks that turns energy into matter. That's everything in the universe, including us humans. And scientists refer to these building blocks as the vector equivalent, or the VE. And the VE forms primary patterns known as the torus. And these shapes form energy fields around people, plants, animals, the earth, our solar system, and the universe itself. So the torus is, if you like, a donut shape, and we live in the middle of this electromagnetic field. And when we talk about being in the flow, it is this toroidal flow of life that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So the infinity symbol is a two-dimensional ancient representation of the toroidal flow. It is self-generating, it is continuous, and it's never ending. And the most important thing I need you to know is that it reminds us that we put out energetically what will return to us. There are no exceptions. And this is the most important thing that we need to know, because you are part of this flow and it is part of you. You create it and it creates you. You put out into the cosmos what always comes back to you. There is no other way. That's how we're created. So once we truly understand that, it allows us to step into more conscious awareness of who we are and how we co-create our own reality.
Okay, so it is pretty fundamental then that we accept and understand that our lives and everything we experience is really part of our own creation, even if it doesn't necessarily seem that way. So what you're saying is that it actually is a matter of science then and not spirituality. And you talk about this, I think it was in your third book, with the truth within the heart of love, as you explore the truth from the 3 principles of science, religion, and philosophy. And basically come to the conclusion that they all say the same thing, that we come into this world from one source, call it what you like, God, source, the cosmic consciousness, or the I am presence. But we're constantly connected to this source. So if we stay in alignment with the flow that opens us up to all of creation, that is a pretty powerful revelation. So how do we stay in alignment, and what do we need to do to stay in this flow? Because we all talked about in our previous podcasts that it's just not that always easy to do.
No, it's not. But to stay in alignment, we need to find balance in our mind, body and soul. So through what we think, what we do, and how we feel. And when we reach this point of balance, we enter a space of nothingness. It's like all the planets and stars are aligned, and within this void lies endless possibility. This is where creation itself happens. The point of singularity exists within the torus in every part of creation, including us, and it's this seed that connects us to source. But as you said, it's not always easy, and to find balance, we need to really understand ourselves. And we become quite blinkered. We see ourselves as one-dimensional, and we're not. We're way more than who we think we are. And actually, there are many aspects of ourselves, and I've kind of come up with this formula of 12 around 1, which is significant because there are 12 dimensions of creation, and these are the fundamental building blocks of reality and how we experience life on Earth. So there is motion, which is expressed as time, and that's physical motion. Feelings, we've talked about in previous podcasts, is the emotional motion. And thought is our mental motion, so the mind. Space, which is present in physical objects as every physical object. There's length, breadth and height. And there's energy, which is present in 3 ways. There's electrical energy, which is the building block of all physical matter. There's magnetic energy, which is the primal field of the universe. And as we've talked about, it's very strong here on Ibiza. And there's etheric energy, which is what we know as prana or chi or life force. And then finally, we have consciousness itself, infinite consciousness of the creator and the mother and father principle. And together, these 12 dimensions form a matrix of how we experience life. And this number 12 appears throughout creation in many ways. There's 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 months of the year, 12 hours of the day, and there are 12 aspects to your being and to mine.
Okay, interesting. I've never looked at it from that perspective before, but I think that the way we experience life seems in reality to be much more complicated than we think. So that's quite a nice way to summarise and sort of separate. And I like this notion of the matrix of space and energy and consciousness and motion all working together. But I think maybe that feels quite theoretical and abstract, if you like. And I see maybe this way of describing life would appeal to people with a more scientific way of being. That's definitely not me. So the left hemisphere thinkers or people with logical minds, I wouldn't say that you're one of those people either, Dee. But is there a way of maybe disseminating this information for people who are perhaps more intuitive or more visual, or I'm thinking maybe, more relatable to a feminine way of describing the same thing? Yeah,
there absolutely is, and you're right. I mean, it is quite scientific, all of this, but it helps us understand some of the more airy-fairy, one might say, feminine ways of explaining the way we live. So for me, once I looked at the science behind spirituality, if you like, and the cosmos and how we live, everything made sense because I was able to integrate the right and left hemispheres together. But what I do in my third book is I look at all aspects of my being through this metaphor of the woman with many faces. And I go into myself and I look at the archetypal energy of my being and how she weaves her way through my life and through my character and my personality. And some of the characters that we present, we don't necessarily like, and others we love. And to find balance, the key is to bring all aspects of our being into play and to love them all. Otherwise, the ones we don't like will send off to the shadows, like the emotions we don't like, and we'll call it in. And often we call in the archetype that we don't like through either a relationship with a friend or a relationship with a lover. So it's super interesting. So I've written about these in my third book, but I'll tell you about them now in a poem which I'll share with you. So this is who I am. She is the lover that everyone knows, for her love is the light, her love is the rose. She is the alchemist whose strength is her power, for her strength is her medicine that will never turn sour. She's the party girl that comes out at night, but the drink is her nemesis, the drink is her plight. She is the martyr of ultimate service, who's prone to self-sacrifice, which can make her feel nervous. She is the fairy godmother, a being of light, a woman by day, an angel by night. She is the wounded child with big sad eyes. She feels the pain of others that they try to disguise. She is the crone, an intuitive sage, for her teachings are magical and get better with age. She is the healer who ignites the purple flame, for her love is a gift, her love transmutes shame. She is the queen, protective of her tribe, but if you get on her wrong side, she'll rattle your vibe. She's the vampire, overcome by lust, betraying her essence with those she thought she could trust. She's the goddess, graceful and wise, for her love is compassion that shines through her eyes. And she is the mother, the giver of life, the protector, the destroyer, and the divine wife.
I love it. The woman of many faces. Yeah, fierce. She sounds very, very fierce, and some aspect of her clearly not to be messed with. I'm a little bit scared of you now on this balcony here in Ibiza. But yeah, that's not really the Dee that I know and love and the one that I've met, I think. So some of those bits are a little bit surprising somehow, but I love the fact that you, as always, are just so brutally honest about yourself, and you're kind of unafraid to write about it, and you know, the good, the bad, the ugly bits of who you are. And I can't imagine, maybe it was that easy to reach such honesty. And I'm thinking about myself and my 12 archetypes, and I'm quite curious, I guess, to draw this picture for me, as I'm sure our listeners are as well. So can you share with us what your process was to get to this sort of 12 around one list? How do you get there?
Yeah, it's been a long process of observation, of really looking at myself over time, my patterns, and how I experience life with others. As I said before, my partners, I call them my love teachers. The men in my life taught me a lot about myself, about my weaknesses, about jealousy, fear and anger. And it takes courage, because you have to be willing to see, you know, the inner bitch and really parts of yourself that are not that nice, but they're the parts that we come to earth to work on, and it's not healthy to always be the fairy godmother, shining your light, sparkling fairy dust everywhere, because often she runs out of dust and she gets pulled in many directions. We have to look into what's hidden behind the ego and our defense mechanisms. And, it's about looking at deep areas like, for me, it was codependency and lack of barriers and discernment that people showed up to teach me. So there is no set formula of coming up with your own list other than just be brutally honest with yourself, recognize your patterns, and, really go deep into who you are and love yourself through the process. There is a place for the vampire. There is a place for the queen and the shadow side of the queen. There is a place for all of that in your life. There's somebody, Caroline Miss is an amazing expert in this field, and she's produced a tool to help guide you to find your archetypal support team. So I would recommend anybody checking her out on the internet. And don't be afraid to look into the good, bad and ugly. They're all part of who you are, and they're all valid at times.
I have to agree with you there. And I think recognising all those little deep, dark parts of ourselves, not all of it always pleasant, it's a good journey to go on, to have a good old rummage around in there and see who else resides on the inside that maybe sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do. So I think once we look into the eyes of who we really are and build these pictures using this archetypal support team of 12 around 1, I think, what next? How do we move beyond those characteristics that we don't like and make changes in our lives to improve on what is there? And how do we reach mastery, so to speak?
Yeah, it's about, again, deep honesty and being kind and gentle with yourself, and knowing that you are actually capable of all things if pushed. There are times when I channel Kali energy, which is a deep, strong, destructive energy that many people are frightened of, but she helps you cut down the barriers within yourself so that you can get beyond this veil between you and the anger or the jealousy or whatever it is that deep down is brewing within you. We all know it, but the more it comes back to this practice of the more time you spend with self, sitting in silence, meditating, getting to know yourself, the more you love yourself, the kinder you can be to these aspects of your being that you find difficult. I find anger. I used to find anger a real struggle. I just could not express it, so it got completely suppressed. But now I use anger for creativity. I use anger when I feel it brewing inside me. I use it for a really positive way, and there's no space for guilt or shame when you use anger not as a destructive force but as a building block for something good. And that's a real conscious way of living with anger, and it feels very different to being shamed by your anger, because anger has a place. It has a place in life. It's okay to express your anger, when necessary. It's justified if it's measured, But one thing to remember is whatever you express, it cannot be undone. You can change your mind about it, but you cannot undo what you send out into the universe. So that breath we need to take before we roar. Take it. Take it. And the more you practice that, I think it allows something like anger just to dissipate a little more.
I think my mum always used to tell me to count to 10, basically, and when I was a little fiery Scorpio young creature. And I think my bark was definitely worse than my bite when I was younger, but it's definitely, I think you soften as well with age and obviously with awareness and experience of what you need to do when you react. And we all react when we're not sort of trained otherwise. And I think, navigating that roller coaster of emotions that we obviously all experience as human beings is quite difficult. You're not really taught at school how to feel. We just, get all these ridiculous subjects which are really quite unhelpful and pointless in part, and then all of a sudden you're thrust out into the world and you've got a lot of stuff to deal with that I think brings up a lot of emotive trauma at times, and I think it's very, very difficult to put that distance sometimes between ourselves and anger and the way we respond. And I think as humans we're often very critical of ourselves when we do respond like that, particularly, and we feel very disappointed and very sad that we've said the things we've said or we've done the things we've done. But I think personally, I mean, you say that things can't be undone. I feel like they can't be undone, they can't be unsaid, they can't be, taken back and, hoovered back up into our faces when we've said those things. But ultimately, I think actions still speak louder than words, and you can resurrect and repair things that we've done and said. And I think, this self-awareness, shining a light on the areas that we need to work on, that we can improve and be the best versions of ourselves. So, Dee, thank you so much, as always, for sharing this wonderful wisdom and for guiding our listeners to this truth so that they can find their own expression of self. And I think we're just going to finish each podcast with what remains to be asked, which is, have you got a final message for our listeners today?
Yeah, so please remember, you are a ripple in the universe, creating each moment for better or worse.
I love that. A ripple to end into the final closure of this podcast. Thank you so much to our wonderful listeners for tuning in today. You can find the Truth Within podcast at sacredstoriesmedia.com on iTunes or from your favourite podcast provider. And you can also connect with Dee via her social media pages on Instagram and Facebook at Dee Delaney01 and find out about these books on her website, www.deedelaney.co.uk, or connect with me, Jo Youle, via my podcast creation services at Reset Rebel Productions. Big love. Until next time.